the UAE acting as a bit of a canary in the coal mine. The Saudis will be watching very closely the domestic response inside the Emirates, the normalization relations, uh, being issue of the Palestinian state solution on the back burner, and with a much more moderate population in the Emirates, Saudis will be wanting to see what the kind of pushback is there. I think if they feel that it's something that will be accepted by the Arab public in the UAE, they might feel more comfortable moving forward in a country with a more conservative population that has been more invested in the Palestinian issue.
Ben, the other interesting angle to this is Iran, which is the glue that binds a lot of these Gulf ties. Interestingly, the pushback against Iran has been profound over the weekend after we saw recent comments from the Iranian chief of staff of the armed forces essentially pushing back on the UAE. He said that the Iranian nation's attitude towards this neighbouring state will change fundamentally, and the Islamic Republic's armed forces will also deal with that country with different calculations. I'm curious to understand from you whether or not you think this UAE-Israel deal has undermined the security of the region and perhaps put some other Gulf nations at risk from Iranian aggression.
Well, this agreement is essentially the coming forward of a lot of sort of informal relations that have been about countering Iranian influence in the region. The ultimate reality is that even though rhetorically the UAE has been opposed to Israel for a very long time, in practice, particularly over the last 10, 20 years, their interests with fear about Iranian expansion throughout the region, Iranian revisionism throughout the region, are actually quite aligned. And we've seen a bunch of moves behind the scenes diplomatically up to the point, but never so overt. What the Iranians are going to be perceiving this as is a solidification of this informal coalition. The fact that the UAE is now the second Arab state to officially recognise Israel's right to exist, and the fear that this will lead to a domino effect. They've already signalled that both Oman and Bahrain are likely to follow suit in the near future, and I think the Saudis would quite likely after that, if they feel they're in a strong position domestically to do that. The Iranians, that would be a major loss strategically throughout the region.